Shalom. Last time we learned an amazing idea that in the beginning of creation, before there was anything but the infinite light, God looked forward into the future. He saw the souls of the righteous. He saw their good deeds. And he said, I'll make the world just for them, regardless of the billions of other people who might not be so righteous. And that should give us all hope and understanding of God's real intent and purpose is to have a partner in creation. He didn't create us just to suffer and for a few good days along the way, No, he created us to be a partner in creation. And how do we know this? Because he tells us, Tzaddik Moshel Yirat Elohim. This is Rabbi Nachman, is in Torah 97. The Tzaddik, and he's bringing a statement from Shmuel, the prophet, the teacher of King David. And he said, Tzaddik Moshel, how does the righteous person rule? Yirat Hashem, Yirat Elohim. Wait a minute. He sits in his room and he prays and he learns. And maybe he talks to a few people and he goes to synagogue. He helps his wife. He works out in the yard sometimes. Maybe he walks his kids to school. Whatever it is, he's not necessarily involved in the world to be ruling anybody. But he has this awe of God that when you're around such a person, you feel the awe, and that makes you want to be connected to him. And his awe transposes itself into being part of you. And when you get the awe of God, you're like, wow, this is no game. This is not another religious trip that people are playing on each other. This is the real deal. And it's the only deal in town. So when he has this awe of Hashem, then kiviyachol, as if to say, he rules with it because people are willing to listen to him and they trust him more than anybody else. And it's not the politicians and it's not the kings and queens and ministers that we're putting our trust in, but we're putting our trust in a person whose behavior and lifestyle and track record proves itself. And not only that, when you're around him, you feel different. V'kol ahad Israel. Now listen to what he says next. Everyone from Israel, everyone can come to this level. Don't give yourself that little, too religious for me default. No, everyone can reach that level. Limshol b'tfilato, how? To rule in his prayer. To rule with prayer. Now it goes into immediately the two obstacles to this level of prayer. Ruling with prayer, which is the net result of having the awe of God in the first place. If you know somebody who prays and he gets answers and he gives good answers and his advices work and good things happen around him, and you see success, you see health, you see joy, well, that might be a good idea to check that person out, because he's reached this level where his awe of Hashem has created a prayer that rules. Because who is Hashem going to answer first? The person who has the best, the most, a positive influence on others. These two obstacles are hadi, kodem tefillah, and shemed pitlela begadlut. The first obstacle is such a person on this path can get to the level where he thinks of his own greatness when he goes to pray. Look at me, I'm going to pray. I'm going to the Kotel. I'm going to the Ma'arat Machpelah. I'm going to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai to pray. And it's that same old sense of ego. It's just attached to this religious practice. That's an obstacle that's going to prevent his prayer from reaching this level. And he's not going to inspire awe in others. He's going to inspire, I know this type of person. This is a person who's still stuck with himself. He doesn't see the world. He thinks he does. But seeing the world here is not feeling and living the world here in your heart. So that's the first obstacle. He goes to prayer with personal greatness on his back of his mind. Somebody thinks, for example, I have great relatives and grandfathers and etc., and therefore, I'm on a special track. Maybe, maybe not. Or even if he has served himself and exerted himself in the service of God, which is a good thing, to exert ourselves in all our power, but not to carry it to the moment of speaking to the creator of the universe. He's got a lot more to do than worry about just you and think about your greatness in service. Now, you might say, well, look, I'm doing what everybody, tells me all the great ones before did. Right, but you still haven't dropped that little thread of self-importance. It comes either from your service itself. See, I'm important because I prayed longer. Well, who says? Or I'm important because I learned more. Who says? Only God can know the answer to that type of question. And so too, this is another obstacle to a person reaching the level of awe, like God is awesome and great, and I can't even lift my eyes to think about it, to think that I'm in the room with Hashem. You're going to run under the couch, Ay, ay, ay. And because of those two reasons we said, personal greatness in prayer or in family genealogy or in money, for that matter, for sure. If a person goes before God and he's wealthy and he thinks it's something, a big deal in his own eyes, then that's not going to make his prayer the prayer that's going to rule anything. We need to forget those things when we go to pray. We are just children before our Father. But yeah, and it's a great Father. It's not a Father that lets us down and runs off to Vegas. And you will feel like today I was born. I'm 63 and I'm 1 day old. I'm a baby. I'm helpless. And you have to feel like I'm alone in the world. I just stepped off the spaceship and where am I? Oh my goodness. I'm alone and helpless, and all I have is this one thread of connection to the creator of the universe. Now he tells us, he brings it all the way down to a representational level in the tribes of Israel. Menashe, of course, is one of the sons of sons of Yosef, I'll get it right, that were born to Yosef, the righteous one, in Egypt. And this idea of why Menashe? Well, Menashe was interesting because, first of all, he was the first one of the viceroy in Egypt, the first child. Second of all, he chose to have land outside Eretz Yisrael and inside Eretz Yisrael. He liked the idea of being further east from here in the Jordan, what's today Jordan, and closer to ancient cultures like Iran and Babylon. Persia and Babylon were great empires through the course of history, obviously, and I'm sure that they were exerting their influence and power in the world then. And this, of course, was part of the whole trade route between Europe, which wasn't very developed then, but all the way into the Far East. So business is business, So Menashe, but we say, the Rebbe takes it to another level. He says, Lashon nishayon v'shichacha. The lashon of test and forgetfulness. Ooh, doesn't sound good. But remember, Jacob he didn't send, but his brother sold him into slavery, and only later Jacob sent for him. But Joseph was on his own at this time. And he goes through the whole test of 13 years in prison. And then he finally gets out of prison, and then suddenly he's skyrocketed to be second in command of the greatest empire of the day. And then he gets out of nowhere, he meets a woman from his family line. One of the granddaughters of Jacob. And he marries her. And he has a baby, Menashe. So, but he doesn't forget, but the Nishayon, the language of being tested and forgetting, and that goes together even if you want, the test of forgetting. See, that's a big deal in Judaism. I was going to say Jerusalem. Interesting, right? Is the test of forgetting. Because once you remember something, it's in your consciousness, you can do it, you can practice it, you can follow it. But if I forget the thing that I learned, then I have to go learn it again. And what could happen then? Okay, but nonetheless, let's stay with the main idea, these two obstacles to prayer. What are they? Don't forget that I'm great. Oh, and that I forgot that I'm great. Hey, it's been a long festival, just getting back to normal here. But really, you think about it. If I can remember that I'm great, why can't I remember that I'm not great, and that God is great, and everything you see is His, and every molecule, and every creature, and every structure, and every reality. And this is the idea. He brings the verse from the beginning of creation: Ki neshani Elohim et kol beit avi. Because, and this is Yosef again talking, because God has made me different than all the rest of the people of my father's house. This is the idea of Yosef be remembering, I'm the son of Jacob, I'm a great one. Now, if you were in prison 13 years and you had a great father somewhere off in the desert, you're hoping to be rescued, it would be good to remember him, I think, right? And certainly a tzaddik like at the level of Jacob, where they say that the Talmud says that people would start trembling about 20 miles, 26 miles, depends on your measurement of what's called a parsa. They would start trembling just when they heard the name Jacob, because they know they're getting closer. Because that's the tzaddik, Moshe b'yirat Hashem. Jacob ruled with his prayer, and people knew who he was, and they knew what his prayer was, and they knew his history, and that reputation vibrates through the world. Right? This is the family relation, the genealogy that gives a person confidence in his power. And all my struggles. That was the second test of the prayer that rules, is to think about everything you've struggled when you go to pray. You have to forget how hard you worked out when you go to play the game. You can't think about how hard you worked out when you're in a boxing match, or you're in a football field, or anywhere else. You got to think about what's in front of you, the game. And that's the standing in front of God and talking to Him with utter respect, prudence, patience, love, all the qualities that we need to bring to the table. And forget Kol Amali, Sha'amal Bavorat Bore, but Yosef did struggle with the service of God very much. What else are you going to do in prison for 13 years? And then they didn't have books and libraries and, I was going to say card catalogs. So I don't think anybody does that anymore. I dated myself there a couple of decades, but that's okay. They actually still have libraries. They do exist. And they have card catalogs, but usually everybody goes to the computer. Nonetheless, it's all the same thing. It's all the idea of my hard work. Forget your hard work when you go to pray. It doesn't matter. That's not what God's interested in. He wants to know where you are today, right now. Where your heart is, where your mind is, where your direction is. And this second one, the idea that I worked hard as an obstacle to prayer that rules, it's within the prayer itself. Well, what happens is when a person has done sins on purpose, knowing what he's doing is wrong and he still does it. And even if he hasn't done them, he thought about them purposefully. It wasn't just a wandering thought in a memory in his mind, but something that he was thinking about regularly, purposefully. Noflim lo machshavot zarot b'tfilato. That's where. How do I know I'm experiencing those events? The types of thoughts that I shouldn't be thinking, the types of deeds that I shouldn't have been doing. If those come up in your thought, it leads to idol worship. And the worst idol worship, my friends, is not the statues in Egypt or Babylon or Persia. And it's not the statues in Washington, D.C. It's the statues you build inside your own soul. And we can do that very easily. And we'll put ourselves on a pedestal just as fast as we can. Some people might call it narcissistic. I think it existed before that word and that concept and that Greek figure a long time before him. But the idea of promoting oneself above everything, including God, that's idol worship of the worst degree. Because of these types of idol worshiping thoughts, self-idol worshiping thoughts, it's impossible to come to the level of ruling with prayer. So how do we break them? How do we get out of this? Is by the good thoughts that come to us in prayer about the prayer itself. In other words, paying simple attention to the meaning of the words. When you say Baruch, you're thinking about blessing God and being blessed and carrying the blessing on into the world. When you say Atah, you better remember who you're talking to. And when you say God's name, you better duck because something could be flying. Because saying God's name is the most awesome thing you can do because he is in his name. And in other words, God allows the divine presence into your mouth when you say his name. Think about that for a bit. What did I just say? That God's divine presence is in his name, and then when I say his name, it's in my mouth. Where God allows us to take him inside us, inside our speech, inside the blessing that we make, all day long. We're making blessing. Baruch atah. We say God's name. Well, when you pull that name into your mouth, we've got to really remember what it is we're doing. We're not just performing religious ritual. We are invoking the presence of the Creator into your room, into your mind, into your heart, into your mouth. There's even a halacha, you're supposed to brush your teeth before you pray. No bad breath accepted in heaven. Can you imagine? Just to lighten it up a little bit, but it is written in the books. And listen, this is the most amazing, beautiful thing. We're going to have to end on it today. But by doing what we just described, of conquering the evil thoughts, the self-idol worshiping thoughts with the pure, true words of prayer, we break the shell of hardness on those sins that we did on purpose, which he calls the strange thoughts, nasim lo kazichuyot, and they're turned into merits. They're not just neutralized and thrown out in the desert. They're turned into merits. The darkness is literally turned into light through the switch in your mind. By having the focus on who you're talking to, what you're saying, how you're saying it, your posture, you're paying attention to all these details and more, you're turning the darkness into light. Now, can there be anything better than that? Did anybody ever just explain prayer to us like Rebbe Nachman? Who wouldn't want to pray after hearing this Torah? Well, I do. So I'm going to have to say goodbye for now. We're going to continue this Torah hopefully tomorrow and continue because this is a lifetime of practice. And we're going to do it together, and we're not going to give up, and we're not going to quit because we are the solution. And the Jewish people need to remember that. Not to look anywhere else but our Father in heaven, and he has all the tools and all the technology and all the wisdom and all the timing and all the insight that we would ever need to win any war and to win the struggles that we have, all of us, within. God bless. Have a great week. We will talk to you again.